gonna throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete, no flags, head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete, incomplete, the bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it, 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, and taking you through the latest that is happening around Carolina football. Me and Josh, we will be back on Wednesday to do a little bit more in-depth reaction to everything that is going on, including more hires on Bill Belichick's staff, as well as additions in the transfer portal. But I thought I'd jump on here. There were a couple people that reached out to me, asked me, hey, when is the next edition of the podcast going to happen? And with everything that's been going on with Tar Heel basketball, with the work schedule, and now, some of the, the weather that's potentially moving in, as well as another basketball game again tomorrow night, it makes sense why we haven't really been able to squeeze anything in during this time. But I thought, while I'm driving over to Josh's house, hanging out tonight for the national championship game, why not get on here and talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on? And of course, the Tar Heels did add another member to their player personnel staff. They go and get a guy that has been around for a while, and a guy that now is going to be a part of Carolina's front office, a guy that was a scout in the NFL under Bill Belichick for 13 years, then eventually for the Houston Texans for 3 years, and then the Denver Broncos was his most recent stop. That's Francie Jourdain, who will come in and join Bill Belichick once again. With Belichick, took home 4 Super Bowl titles, was part of helping build those Super Bowl teams, and also was a part of the other teams that went to the Super Bowl but ultimately fell short. So he's a guy who's had a pretty storied career so far. And he's definitely someone that I think fits exactly what Carolina needs right now in that player personnel department as they continue to pile up, former NFL guys. And that's one of the big things when it comes to being able to put together an NFL-like staff is, yes, you are putting together, the coaching staff that involves some NFL guys. And there are a good amount of people, that have NFL experience already on this staff. I know earlier today, someone on Facebook was complaining to me that they don't have enough of that NFL flavor, that they should be getting guys that are a part of some of these teams that are still alive, some of the teams that just finished in the NFC divisional round, some of the guys off of teams that will play in this championship round. That's not happening. I just want to break it to you guys. It's not going to happen. They are not going to be able to hire guys away that are in high-profile positions currently in the NFL. But they have brought some NFL flavor on the coaching staff. The most important thing, though, is that you've got a strength and conditioning staff that has spent a long time in the NFL, or at least your head strength and conditioning guy, the guy that's going to be the director for Carolina in the weight room, and when it comes to conditioning, Moses Cabrera, I mean, that's a guy that's been around the NFL for, pretty much his entire coaching career, pretty much his entire training career. And you've also got guys in the front office. That's another crucial area where you've got to be looking for that type of NFL talent. And I think that's what you're going to get with, a guy like Jourdain, a guy like Joe O'Neal, who comes from the NFL ranks as well. Plenty of other guys that have been in the NFL or, in college football, so they know how it works. It's a good blend so far, very similar to what we're seeing on the coaching staff. When it comes to the coaching staff, the latest addition that Carolina made, Bob Diaco, that's a name that should be pretty familiar if you're a big-time college football person. I don't know, for some of the people that are more casual, where he kind of ranks on that list. But remember, this is a guy that was very, very successful as the defensive coordinator under Brian Kelly back in 2009 for Cincinnati. Was the guy that coordinated a defense that helped Cincinnati go undefeated and go to the Sugar Bowl, and then eventually follows Brian Kelly in 2010 to Notre Dame, takes over their defense, and in 2012, of course, put together one of the greatest defenses in Notre Dame history that involved Manti Te'o. He is one of the guys that is looked at as most responsible for the development of Manti and the amount of success that he had, of course, finishing second in the Heisman voting that year and leading Notre Dame to the national title game, where, of course, they would fall to the Alabama Crimson Tide. But a good track record for him, multiple stops since then as a defensive coordinator, which weren't necessarily successful. But Carolina is bringing him in as a linebackers coach, and he coached linebackers back in 2018 when he was with Oklahoma. That worked out very, very well with Kenneth Murray, a guy who ended up being a pretty high-end draft pick and compiled 155 total tackles that season. And he's also coached linebackers in a couple of different spots that he's been since then. So I really like that pickup, a guy that's been around college football for a long, long time, since 1996. And I definitely think that he is someone that, Stephen Belichick will be able to lean on. And I think that's important. Belichick, the junior of the two, still, relatively new to not only being a college coach, but also being a defensive coordinator. When he was with his dad, he was an assistant, but taking on that coordinator role, he had some success this past year at Washington. But, there were some bumps in the road as well. I think having an experienced guy like Bob Diaco there with him will certainly be a boost for him. So I'll be interested to see just how much, it ends up working out, and how much he potentially leans on him and almost like a co-defensive coordinator role, although that title is not official. But that is the latest hire to go along with some really great hires that Carolina has made throughout. So far, there is an article up on the website, the one about Francie Jourdain, that does have the update, but there are some guys doing a lot of work. And the guy that I think is really standing out right now is the youngest guy on this staff. It's the guy with the least experience of being a position coach, because he's never been a full-time position coach. And that's Armand Hawkins, but he is going to be one of the names to reckon with. We heard when he took the job, he is very well regarded as a recruiter, and we're seeing that already. He got the commitment in the 2026 class yesterday from three-star cornerback Marcellus Ryan. Really quickly on him, lots to like about him. Smaller corner at 5'10", but I do think, the way that he plays, it could allow him to be successful on the outside. Very similar type of player, I thought, to Elijah Huzzie. I love the speed that he brings. He's a guy that has handled return duties. Now, he is not a guy that's been using punt return as his area where he's been stacking up those return yards. Instead, it's been the kick return. But I do think that he's got great straight line speed. He does a great job of staying with receivers when he's in man coverage. Also plays a lot of zone coverage as well and really thrives in that. The speed really shows up, the burst, when he's able to break on the football and consistently make plays on it. Also really, really like how aggressive he is as a tackler. Definitely, someone that is going to be involved when he gets to this level in run defense. You want to see the willingness, especially for outside corners. We're not expecting them to be guys that have massive tackle numbers, but you're hopeful that, hey, if you are put in a situation where you have to tackle, you can do that. And for him at 5'10", it's also important to prove that you are a good fundamental tackler, because there's a chance you're probably going to end up having to play in the slot. But again, like I said, love the hips. Plays bigger than his size, so you never know. He could be a guy that ends up sticking on the outside. I think for him, it's going to be about continuing to build off of what he's done the last couple of years. He's done it at 2 different schools now, so a guy that's dealt with a little adversity. We'll see ultimately what he ends up becoming, but I love the fact that already they're going and picking him up, and this is a commitment from out of the state of California. So we knew that Carolina was going to become much more national in the way that they recruit. You've seen the offers that they've been giving out in the 2026 class, and this is another one. This is a guy that Carolina, offers, and in less than a day, they end up landing his commitment. So this is where we're at now. I think you're starting to see in that 2026 class the appeal of playing for a guy like Bill Belichick. Now it's starting to show up. I think people were a little bit concerned about, would you be able to actually see, the results this early? And I think there was some concern on the recruiting trail. There was some concern, especially in the portal. But I think what we've seen is that that's been calmed over the last couple of weeks. And I do think, continuing with the success that Hawkins has had, I think one of the big areas where he's been most successful has been in the transfer portal. I mean, you look at the guys that he's gotten back there. Yes, he's picked up a lot of guys from Washington that can help in that secondary, but I really like Peyton Waters. I think there's a lot of potential there. The most important one, though, is the one that he just picked up on Saturday, and that's Thaddeus Dixon. And this is an unbelievable job by Carolina to convince him to stick with them, stick with a coach that he knows, stick with a system that he knows under Stephen Belichick, and to come to Carolina. And it seems like Carolina might have shelled out the money for him, because this was a guy where Ole Miss was clearly involved in this one, hosted him for a multi-day visit. It seemed like everything was pointing to him potentially ending up there or going back to Washington. And Carolina makes sure that that doesn't happen. Hawkins a big part of that, and now Carolina has one of the best corners in the transfer portal. Arguably the best player that Carolina's landed in the transfer portal at a position that they needed to land somebody. It had to happen. They could not go without landing a commitment in this class at that position. And credit to this staff for being aggressive there, because, yeah, you had to replace Elijah Huzzie. I know they kept Ty Adams from going to the transfer portal, but he's a guy that's a redshirt freshman. He hasn't really played that much. The reason that I thought that was big was for the future. I think he's a guy that you can potentially find a way to develop, and hopefully that's what Carolina is planning to do. But now this takes the pressure off of him. This means that he doesn't necessarily have to come in and be the guy right away for Carolina this year, opposite of Marcus Allen. I think this definitely puts Carolina in a spot where now they feel pretty comfortable with where they are at. By the way, Carolina has just landed another commitment out of the state of California, and that would be Justin Lewis, the three-star corner out of the state of California, as I mentioned. That's huge. That's huge for Carolina. This is a guy, 6'2", 170 pounds, has the more ideal length to be able to play on the outside. And again, this is Hawkins flexing that muscle in an area where he's been recruiting for the last few years, of course, in his time at Washington. before that in his time at USC. He's very familiar with this area, and if you can get the pipeline to California that it seems like they're trying to establish, that would be huge. And so you combine this pickup, another 2026 guy. We'll have the article on the website for you guys to check out, HeelToughBlog.com. Should actually be up there as of right now when you're watching this, but at the time of recording, of course, it is not. But yeah, I mean, this is a great job. That 2026 class shaping up very well, at least in the secondary, off to a very, very good start, establishing one of the connections that if they can actually find a way to get a pipeline to California, it would be massive and gives Carolina a chance to be very, very successful sooner rather than later. But I mean, back to Dixon, I mean, you're talking about an all-conference caliber corner. A guy that did some very special things this past year at Washington, was their best corner, and, you know, enters the portal, wants to follow Hawkins, and, you know, Carolina apparently putting up the money for him. They were in a legitimate battle with Ole Miss, and we know Ole Miss is willing to pay. They have paid every guy over the last few years in the portal that they have gotten. They've paid them significant money, and they are wanting to rebuild that side of the football again after, you know, bringing in a lot of one-year guys last year. They still feel like they're a team that can compete in the SEC. So hopefully, you know, for Carolina, this is a sign of things to come. That, yeah, if we want a guy, we're going to be able to spend the money, and hopefully shows that that NIL money is there already. I don't know if it's $20 million just yet, but I do think that there is a pretty decent amount of money that's already there, a decent investment that allowed Carolina to get Thaddeus Dixon. The other addition that Carolina has made in the transfer portal is Daniel King, the offensive line transfer from Troy. This was a guy that entered the transfer portal on Wednesday of last week, takes a visit to Chapel Hill on Thursday, and pretty much when he comes out and is talking about the visit and says, I don't have any other visits scheduled at this time, it became pretty obvious that it was going to be Carolina. And this is another nice addition. 24/7 Sports ranks it as the best addition. I don't know if I'm going there. And I get it. You know, he played in an offense that threw the ball a lot. He allowed 5 sacks a year ago. Now, this year was much better. This year's, you know, at right guard, you know, he did a great job, I thought, of protecting the quarterback for most of the year, allowed just 1 sack. But I do kind of worry just a little bit about that 5-sack number. Hopefully that's a number that was just a blip on the radar, and he is able to prove that he, you know, can pass protect at a high rate, because that's the biggest concern for Carolina. You know, the thing that we've seen with this team is that they can run block just about as well as anybody, especially this past year. I thought, look, this past year there was improvement. There's no doubt there was improvement from that unit, but it still wasn't as great as it needed to be in pass protection, especially in some crucial moments in the season down the stretch of the year, you know, and even some of the games earlier in the season when Carolina went through that losing streak. So hopefully, you know, this is a group that will pass protect better. That's why a guy like Daniel King, you kind of wonder if he does have some pass protection struggles, is that something that he is eventually able to shake off with Carolina? Still, I mean, 24/7 Sports really values him. They think he is an incredibly valuable piece for Carolina, and it wouldn't shock me if he's a guy that ends up starting at the right guard spot. Then you've got, you know, Chad Lindbergh, another guy that Carolina's brought in at offensive tackle, played at Rice, was incredibly productive, did not allow a sack last year. I think he's going to start at either left or right tackle. Miles McVay, the Alabama transfer, upside pickup, certainly a guy that I could see, you know, potentially sitting for a little bit of time, but then eventually probably ends up becoming a starter for Carolina. But he's hoping to make that impact early. And then back on the interior, you've got Christo Kelly, a guy who has experience at Holy Cross, 2 years as a starter. Could be another guy that factors in for Carolina in one of those starting roles, especially if they believe that Aiden Banfield, you know, it needs a little bit more time to grow. And then, you know, you've got William Boone, another offensive tackle transfer, another veteran. That's a guy that, look, if Miles McVay isn't ready, if they don't feel like you can put Lindbergh at left tackle, they would rather have him at right tackle and don't feel comfortable with Trevion Green at left tackle, then yeah, you can roll him out there. So I really like the depth. That offensive line class that Carolina has brought in the transfer portal is outstanding. They have done a great job there. And the hope is that they can, be able to build off of the success that they've had landing these guys and develop these guys a little bit better than some of the offensive linemen that Carolina's had. That's another area where Carolina's recruited pretty well there. You look at the guys that they brought in, guys that stick out, Zach Rice still on the roster, never really developed them. Same thing with a guy like William Barnes, who started for a few years for Carolina, but wasn't all that successful, never really developed them. Eli Sutton, another guy that just got in the portal this year, came in as a 4-star, never really developed them. So I think that Carolina is hoping that this group of transfers, combined with a guy like Austin Blasky, who they brought in last year, they can put together a unit that can be more consistent in pass protection, run block the way that they did this year, and put together a unit that could be one of the better ones in the ACC this year. That's the hope, especially you have no idea what quarterback you're going to be starting. Could it be Bryce Baker, the true freshman? Well, if it's him, you better find a way to pass protect for him. Ryan Brown, guy that, is not really a runner, more of a pocket-based quarterback, need to find a way to protect him. And we know that Max Johnson needs to be protected. You saw in the first game of the season this past year that he is not the most mobile guy. And especially if he's a guy that's going to continue to try to play at Carolina, which it looks like he's going to, and it looks like he's going to attempt to come back next year, then, you're going to have to protect the guy that's coming off a serious leg injury. So we'll see, ultimately what happens, but I feel pretty good about where that unit is at and how hard this staff has hit that position. Now, when it comes to the 2025 recruiting trail, Carolina did land a commitment, completed a flip, and this was one that I think was pretty much a long-standing flip, of Chinedu Onyegoro, a guy out of the state of California that was committed to SMU, actually was signed with SMU and ends up getting out of that and will now enroll at North Carolina and will be a part of that defensive line, that edge rusher group moving forward. This is a nice pickup for Carolina. Do I look at him as a guy that's on the same level as Austin Alexander? I do not. I think Austin Alexander, legitimate 4-star, and a guy that I think with the size that he brings to the table, he can have an impact for Carolina right away if they need him to. I think he'll probably battle for one of the rotational roles. Don't think he's going to be starting at any point this upcoming season, but I do think that there is an avenue for him to be a rotational guy there. When it comes to Onyegoro, little more raw. I think, the size is definitely something at 235 pounds. I think he's, somewhere around 6'4", 6'5", so a lankier guy. You love the length, but that means, when you have, less weight on you, it's going to be more noticeable. And the thing with him, incredibly, incredibly productive. You're talking about one of the most productive players probably in this entire class. 30 tackles for loss or more in 2 of his 3 seasons at the high school level, 20 or more sacks in the final 2 seasons at the high school level. So yeah, big numbers, but we've seen this before. I always caution people. We've seen this with a guy like Malachi Hamrick. We saw it with Curtis Simpson, and Curtis Simpson's still very early in his career. He certainly has a chance to pan out. But when it comes to a guy like Hamrick, the numbers were there. You always wonder, are some of these numbers maybe just a little skewed? Maybe some of the sacks that they have should have been half sacks or whatever, or it's just the level of competition that they play at. For Onyegoro, you play in the state of California, but you are in the 6A classification, and they go in reverse. So 1A in the state of California is the top classification, and then it goes all the way down. I believe it's to 7 or possibly 8A. So, a lower level of competition, but it's still the state of California. So there's a lot to like. When you look at the prospect himself, I think this is a guy that Carolina is going to be able to work with. First of all, incredibly versatile. You can play him at edge rusher. You could play him at linebacker because they played him a little bit there this year. Now, he's going to be a guy that you're going to want getting downhill if he's playing linebacker. You're going to want him blitzing a lot. He can drop into coverage, though, and I got to tell you, For a guy that didn't play that exclusively, played a lot on the edge and, kind of split his snaps between there and the linebacker spot when they would use him in some of those blitz packages, he looked really good when they would drop him into coverage. He looked better than Camden Laudenschlager, the guy that, his high school officially moved him to that spot. And look, Laudenschlager is a guy that's rated outside of the top 1,000. So yeah, it makes a little bit of sense, but there wasn't the stiffness in the hips, not nearly as much as there was for a guy like Laudenschlager or some of the other edge rushers that you would see if they put them in that situation. He is a guy that can do so many different things for you. So I really like that element of him. But then when you just talk about him as an edge rusher, quick release off the line of scrimmage, great first step, puts him in a really good position to be able to get past whatever tackle he's lined up against. Then you factor in the speed. Speed is there, no question about it, and it shows up in a multitude of ways. When you combine it with the high motor, it's the reason why he's able to chase down plays from behind. And when we say high motor, it's very obvious when you watch some guys, and especially if you watch them live. There are guys that when a play is run to the opposite side from them, they're pretty much taking the play off. They're going to stand there, they're going to watch, and move on. And there's always going to be moments, especially when you're tired, that's going to happen, for any edge rusher. But I think with Onyegoro, you see a lot of times on film where he is chasing down guys from behind that are running to the opposite side of him. And he doesn't look at it as a play that, it's not coming my way, I don't really have to bust it here. No, he's going to get in there, make a play. So I really like that element that he brings to the table. And then, when it comes to, first of all, shedding blocks, does a good job of that. Uses technical pass rush moves at times, but, I think the speed really shows up. So that's an area that you're going to have to work on, is how at this level is he going to be able to get off of blocks. He's got to become either a much more polished technical guy. And when I say much more polished, I mean really just he has to do it more often. And you want to, shore up some certain areas when it comes to that. Or and one of the other things he's going to have to do, not even an or, is he's going to have to learn how to handle physicality. He's going to have to become a little bit stronger, be able to get in there and battle with some of these offensive linemen that he's going to be facing, because at this level, you can't just bank on being able to beat guys with your speed. So I think that's going to be part of the learning curve for him. But one thing that is really great about him is if he doesn't get to the quarterback, he is one that religiously gets his hands up. And at his size, it allows him to make plays. You're looking for smart football guys like that. Guys that know how to affect the game, even if they can't get after the quarterback at that edge rusher spot. So I like a lot about him. I think there is a ton of potential there. He was committed to SMU, so power conference commit, and that was a team that had a lot of success this past year. I could see him being a guy down the line that is a contributor for Carolina. Do I think right now he is going to be a guy that's going to come out and have a huge effect this year? Probably not. I think this year is going to be focused on him adding some weight. Also, on him adding a little bit of physicality to his game. But I do think, within the next couple of years, he will be a piece that Carolina will be able to use off the edge. And really, that's all you're asking for. That's what you're asking for at this point with the 2025 classes. Just give me a couple of guys that will be on this roster in the future, could be able to contribute. Another guy like that Carolina just recently offered, Tyler Hauser, the linebacker, guy that is a 3-star prospect, was committed to Wake Forest. Now Carolina going after him as well. So a guy out of the state of New Jersey, that's an area that Carolina is trying to get into, so that could certainly help them there. I like this as a potential addition as well for this class. And after that, I don't really know if there's any other areas that you're going to see Carolina add. I think they probably feel comfortable, even though that would be a 13-player class. It is pretty small, but I think that probably is where they want to get to right now, unless there is another guy that pops up on their radar here. Maybe someone that gets out of out of an NLI from December that maybe like Onyegoro is out there and available, but we'll have to just wait and see whether or not that actually happens. But a great job by the staff really to rally and put together a decent class. So that's the look at all of the latest news around Tar Heel football. Again, we'll be back later in the week to break it down a little bit more, me and Josh, giving you our opinions a little bit further on what exactly is going on, and a quarterback name that has been floated out there that Carolina has been linked to. Do we want to get involved in this recruitment, or is it better off for Carolina to just stay away? Find out what that is on the next edition of the podcast on Wednesday night. It'll be live on the Heel Tough blog Facebook page, the YouTube page, and Josh's personal Twitter page at @HTB_Josh, if you guys want to check that out. And of course, if you're a listener to the podcast, that episode will be up there on Wednesday night for you guys to check out. If you can't listen to it on that night, of course, early Thursday morning, we encourage you. Give it a listen. If you do, wherever you get your podcast, subscribe, follow, whatever it is, leave us a rating. We'd also greatly appreciate that from you guys. Meanwhile, on the website, articles about all of this stuff up there for you guys to check out. Make sure you go back, check out the Thaddeus Dixon, Daniel King articles where we break those guys down. Plenty of other stuff on the website with the hiring of Francie Jourdain. So make sure you check that out. Bob Diaco, also an article up there about him for you guys to be able to check out. So all of that stuff, we want you guys to go to the website, check it out, and tell us, what you're thinking about where this Carolina team is at right now. When it comes to basketball, yeah, we'd love for you to do the same thing, although they're not in the greatest spot. But yeah, the articles are always up there recapping and previewing the games. Any other news that's coming out, we've got an announcement from 2025 5-star forward Caleb Wilson, not Caleb Foster, Caleb Wilson, who will be announcing his commitment on Thursday. So we're going to have you covered on all fronts with that. Carolina quietly right now the favorite, but as we know, especially when it comes to basketball recruiting, things can change in the blink of an eye. So all of that coverage for you guys will be on the website, and then me and Josh taking you through the season on the podcast side of things. You don't want to miss our reactions to these games or our previews for these games, especially with how up and down Carolina has been this season. But that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening, and as always, go Tar Heels.